In Magic the Gathering, Barbarian is a predominantly red creature type, and creatures with the type are a particular kind of warrior, one that is not from an organized military of any kind that relies less on technique or even weaponry and armor, but instead relies on their superior physical prowess. This creature type has been around for a long time, first appearing on 2 cards in 1995's Ice Age. It would later retroactively be added to Alpha's Keldon Warlord, making it the oldest card that currently has the Barbarian type. For a time, Barbarian was actually one of the most common and heavily supported creature types in Magic, even receiving typal payoffs. However, it's not a very common creature type these days, though it does make an appearance every now and then. In all, there are 46 Barbarians in Magic, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you want Magic singles or sealed product, use my link in the description. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I rank cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points. This includes events like Pro Tours, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. This includes events like the Spotlight series. At number 10, it's Kamahl, the Pit Fighter. This legendary barbarian is 4 generic and 2 red for a 6/1 with haste, and he can tap to do 3 damage to any target. While 1 toughness for 6 mana is not usually where you want to be, his haste means that he can smash in against a defensive opponent a decent chunk of the time, and his ability to be a repeatable lightning bolt is something you'll have access to the turn he comes down, which is especially nice if he's not in a spot where he can attack. Left unchecked, that ability alone can really take over the game. He saw some play when he was in Standard in red-green aggro decks, but he doesn't have any top 8 since 2002. At number 9, it's Balduvian Horde. It has the same total points as Kamahl, but has more first-tier top 8, so I gave it the higher spot on the list. For 2 generic and 2 red, it's a 5/5, and when it enters, you have to sacrifice it unless you discard a card at random. So yeah, you have to 2-for-1 yourself up front when you play this, which usually isn't ideal, but back when this was printed in 1996, you just didn't get a 4-mana 5/5 very often, and when you did, it came with some downside. It saw play in aggro decks in Ice Age Block Constructed, but it hasn't put up any top 8s since that Pro Tour in 1996. At number 8, it's Hobgoblin Captain. For 1 generic and a red, it's a 3/1, and when it attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, the Captain gains first strike until end of turn. That trigger counts itself, so it gets you halfway to 6 on its own, and if you do get there, a 3/1 is a creature that is a very real problem and can attack on virtually any board. This is one of the more recent Barbarian cards. It's a creature type we've seen show up in the various Dungeons & Dragons sets because Barbarian is also a class in Dungeons & Dragons. It was played in mono-red aggro decks in Standard, especially when those decks had some extra goblin stuff going on. Battlecry Goblin and Hobgoblin Bandit Warlord both made it a lot easier for you to get pack tactics going. However, Hobgoblin Captain doesn't have any top 8 since 2022. At number 7, it's Sardian Cliffstomper. For 1 generic and a red, it's a 0/4, and if it's your turn and you control 4 or more mountains, the Cliffstomper gets +X/+0, where X is the number of mountains you control. This starts out pretty bad, but if you've got a lot of mountains in your deck, it can kind of feel like Tarmogoyf, as it'll be 2 mana for something that can swing really hard for a 2-drop. It's how play in Standard mono red aggro, especially in variants of the deck that leaned on other mountain payoffs, like Koth, Fire of Resistance. However, it doesn't have any top 8 since rotating out of Standard. At number 6, it's Vicious Battlerager. For 3 generic and a black, it's a 1/5, and when it enters, you take the initiative. When it becomes blocked by a creature, that creature's controller loses 5 life. This is another Barbarian from a Dungeons & Dragons set, as you can probably tell from the initiative mechanic, which is a different sort of spin on the venture into dungeon mechanic from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. That mechanic was pretty underwhelming in pretty much every form of Magic, so they really wanted to push this mechanic when it came around, and they definitely succeeded. If a card gives you the initiative, it means that you venture into one specific dungeon, the Undercity. This is a game piece separate from your deck, and anytime you venture, you either start at the secret entrance or advance 1 room from top to bottom. You venture into the Undercity anytime you take the initiative, and during your upkeep too if you have the initiative. In other words, the first time you take the initiative, you immediately get to search up a basic land and put it into your hand, and then if you have the initiative on your next upkeep, or you take the initiative again, you can choose to get 2 +1/+1 counters or scry 2, and it just gets better from there, eventually culminating with you putting the best creature in your top 10 cards directly on the battlefield with 3 +1/+1 counters on it and temporary hexproof. There is one downside though. Any player can take the initiative from another player by doing combat damage to them, but the downside is well worth it with a card like the Battlerager, as it's effectively like you get an amazing enters trigger when it comes down, one that typically grants you at least a card of value, and then its defensive body makes it hard for your opponent to take the initiative away, and if they do, the Battlerager can threaten to take it back by attacking, making your opponent choose between letting you take back the initiative or losing a whopping 5 life. Basically, the Battlerager and other initiative creatures are all insane value engines that give you a ton for the cost. Most of its top 8s have come in Pauper, a format where only commons are legal, and also a format where initiatives simply prove to be way too powerful. There just aren't that many commons in the game that have such absurd value potential, so the Battlerager and many other initiative creatures have been banned out of the format. The Battlerager also has a single legacy top 8, but it doesn't have any top 8 since 2023, and it currently doesn't have a home in any format. At number 5, it's Godo, Bandit, Warlord. For 5 generic and a red, he's a 3/3, and when he enters, you tutor up an equipment and put it on the battlefield. Whenever Godo attacks for the first time each turn, you untap it and all samurai you control, and then there's an additional combat phase. A 6-mana 3/3 isn't very efficient, but because it's able to tutor up any equipment you want and put it directly on the table, you often get more than 6 mana of value out of this card, especially when you consider his ability to grant additional combat phases. In both Modern and Legacy, Godo has most frequently grabbed Batterskull, an equipment that comes with a ready-made body. It's kind of like playing a 6-mana 3/3 that also makes a 4/4 with Vigilance and Lifelink, and more upside beyond that. And Vigilance works super well with Godo's extra combat ability since it can attack in both combats despite not being a samurai. However, Godo doesn't have any top 8 since 2017 and is likely to lose ground on this list in the future. At number 4, it's Plundering Barbarian. For 2 generic and a red, it's a 2/2, and when it enters, it either destroys an artifact or creates a treasure token. If you've got a target to destroy, this is really powerful. So it's nice that it also has a mode that is pretty much always useful, as you can often find something to do with a treasure. It means this has a reasonable floor and a high ceiling, and it's the kind of card that can give you artifact hate without having to wait to sideboard it in. It was featured in mono red aggro decks while it was in standard and has seen some play in Pauper too, but doesn't have any top 8 since 2022. At number 3, it's Undead Gladiator. For 1 generic and 2 black, it's a 3/1, and when it's in your graveyard, you can pay 1 generic and a black and discard a card from your hand to return it to your hand, and you can play that ability during your upkeep. It also comes with cycling for 1 generic and a black, so you can put it into your graveyard without ever actually having it in play. It was played in ramp decks and block constructed and mono black control in standard. These decks loved having a recursive creature that could either protect them or serve as a win condition, and it also made the deck's use of Innocent Blood and Mutilate way better. Even if those effects are symmetrical, it doesn't really matter when your Undead Gladiators die because you can get them back later. It also saw some play in Astral Slide decks. That powerful enchantment lets you blink a creature every time you cycle, and Undead Gladiator can pretty much make sure you cycle every single turn. It also has a single top 8 from a black-red aggro deck in Legacy, but doesn't have any top 8s anywhere since 2007. At number 2, it's Yavimaya Barbarian. For a red and a green, it's a 2/2 with protection from blue. This is a Barbarian that wouldn't be all that exciting today. After all, it's a 2-mana 2/2 with some super specific upside, but this kind of creature used to be way better, and that was particularly true in Standard between 2001 and 2002, where there was more than one kind of powerful blue deck that you could expect to run into, whether it was blue-green madness or opposition-based decks. These decks were so prevalent that most of the Barbarians' top 8s actually came in the main deck, despite looking more like a sideboard card. However, its time in the sun was relatively brief. It doesn't have any top 8s in more than 23 years, but its regular success back in the day was still enough for it to be the number 2 Barbarian in Magic. And at number 1, it's Caves of Chaos Adventurer. For 3 generic and a red, it's a 5/3 with trample, and when it enters, you take the initiative. When it attacks, you exile the top card of your library, and you can play it this turn. And if you've completed a dungeon, you can play that card this turn without paying its mana cost. A 4-mana 5/3 trampler that pretty much draws you a card when it attacks is already great, so adding all of that amazing initiative upside is amazing. Not only does it give you the value engine potential all initiative cards give you just by letting you venture into the dungeon, it also lets you cast stuff for free when you reveal it when it attacks. Because it's from Commander Legends, Battle for Baldur's Gate, the only 60-card formats it's legal in are Legacy and Vintage, It's played in initiative-centric decks in Legacy, but it's also put up plenty of top 8s in Dragon Stompy decks. These are prison decks that look to lock your opponent out of their mana with Blood Moon and similar effects, while running tons of creatures that generate impressive value without you having to spend any more mana to do it. And I think there's an argument that Caves of Chaos Adventurer is the second best creature in a powerful deck, surpassed only by Broadside Bombardiers. Caves of Chaos is going to continue to put up top 8s in the Eternal formats, and it's going to be the best Barbarian in Magic for the foreseeable future. So, those are Magic's 10 best Barbarians. Are you building a Balthor Commander deck? If so, check out the description where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you want to make sure you catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on past videos, including many more that look at specific creature types, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.